There are 254 town meeting members, 128 constitute a quorum. We're going to debate and we'll eventually come to vote.
So I ask you to support this motion.
I see no hands. Am I missing one?
Need the community these bring together.
I was an elementary school teacher.
I think what we're hearing, two separate issues.
Public art's been an important part of this community.
I urge you to vote yes on this proposal.
Call the previous question.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, please say no. No. We'll have an electronic vote.
I move to adjourn.
We are adjourned.
Hello, welcome to Conversations About Town Meeting. My name is Carol Gray, and I'm doing this show to discuss the history and value of town meeting over the many decades. In fact, we're almost at the 259th anniversary of Amherst Town Meeting. Amherst Town Meeting was first called to order on March 19th, 1759. The moderator at that time was Dea Ebezr Dickinson. And we have on the table the conch shell. Back in the early days, that's how they called town meeting to order, was the blowing of a conch shell. Not this one here, but the actual one is kept safely with the Historic Society. We're here today with Molly Turner, who is a long-term member of town meeting. She's been serving for literally decades. She's also been serving the town in many other capacities. She's been a member of the town meeting coordinating committee for numerous years. She was a Jones Library trustee and probably many other things as well. Thank you for coming on the show, Molly. So today we're going to continue the discussion where we've had last show about people who've served many years in town meeting and really made their mark on town meeting. And they had fascinating lives, and Molly's here to help me discuss them. And we're going to start off the discussion with Stephen Puffer. Molly, I wasn't actually serving in town meeting when he was there. Maybe you could tell what you remember about Stephen Puffer.
Well, he was a long-term member, and I think he went back to the beginning of the representative town meeting, and I don't know what date that was, but he had stories to tell, and he had a great influence. People very much respected him in town meeting, but he had a lot of interest in the town. He had a lot of real estate adventures, and I think that was Pofton Village was his. Well, the story I remember most about Stephen Puffer in town meeting was when there was an article about some conservation land, and so it may have been Mary Wentworth, another long-term member of the town meeting. It may be an article that she brought in, but it was conservation, which is something the town of Amherst has done for a long time. It was a real trendsetter in conserving land. Mm-hmm. And I lived in the town of Lincoln, and when Lincoln, Massachusetts began conserving land, it looked to Amherst as a model. So that's been a thread throughout town meetings.
Right.
Now this particular parcel, I don't have the memory of it, but I remember him coming to speak. Stephen Puffer spoke about this, and he said, "This is just a wonderful piece of land, and we really can't let it go." And he went on and on about it, and you would have thought he was talking in favor of the vote to preserve this, make it part of our conservation. And not until the last minute, he said, "If it goes, it's gone forever, and we will never be able to develop it." Yeah. And then he looked at Mary Streeter and he said, "I'm sorry, Mary."
Well, but he also was responsible for some conservation land that we love, like Puffer's Pond, right?
I really don't know that history. Well, I just remember that it was how charming he was about sticking up for his interests or the interests of development.
Yeah, I did find an old article about discussing Puffer's Pond Dam, and it said, ironically, Stephen Puffer, whose family originally owned the stone dam, and the town engineer, Jim Smith, who we're going to talk about perhaps in another show, did the repairs on this. So I think Puffer's Pond is definitely linked to the Puffer family. Yes. So just, I was able to find online that Stephen Puffer lived from 1914 to December 5th, 2011, and from the North Amherst area. I did get a lovely recollection from Diana Stein. She said she remembered Stephen Puffer always brought a cup of liquid up to the moderator at halftime. Was it coffee, water? She didn't know, but
I remember that.
Do you remember that?
Yes, I do remember that. And it was a certain time, and he would do, and he did it well in later years. And I don't know. This is another fact I don't know for sure, but I think he was close into his 90s when he was still serving at town meeting.
Well, Alan Powell provided a picture that he had of Stephen Puffer and Zach Baricius as the youngest and oldest serving town meeting members. Zach was then, I believe, in college, very young, in his probably late teens, and Stephen Puffer. I'm not sure exactly how old he was, but I'm going to share that picture with Amherst Media, and hopefully we can include that with this video. Any other recollections of Stephen Puffer?
No, I don't have any other recollections in town meeting, no.
Yeah? Okay, great. Well, let's go on to Ott Stein, since we mentioned the email that I got from Diana. What do you recall about Otto?
Well, he could be relied upon to end the debate. He did not like to have endless debate. He wanted to get on with it, and I think he believed that when he was satisfied that all the points had been made that needed to be made, he would call the question, and the moderator could depend on him if he wanted to end the debate.
Well, that's right. As a matter of fact, Barbara Ford emailed in the same recollection. I'll just read what she emailed. And by the way, if anyone who's viewing has recollections about, we're going to do one more show on people who've been in town meeting and are no longer with us. So if you have recollections, please feel free to email them to me. And my email is carolgray_2000@yahoo.com. Anyway, Barbara Ford mentioned that Ott Stein could be relied upon to call the question if debate got too repetitious or at least at the right moment. Now that I think about it, I believe he took up T.O. Wilkinson's mantle. T.O. could be relied on to call the question at the appropriate time. In both cases, the moderator definitely sought them out, hoping for the best. Sometimes the moderator was fooled, as were the rest of us. So that's a nice recollection. Thank you for sending that in, Barbara. Otto was also on the Conservation Commission for many years, and I really enjoyed reading his obituary because he had an incredible life. He was a botany professor, and he was born originally in Germany, and he was a translator at the Dachau war crime trials. Actually, it's a very fascinating story. He talked about how on Kristallnacht in Germany, he and his parents were protected by policemen who guarded their apartment all night because he respected Otto's parents' work with disabled children in Germany. He also lived briefly in a farming community for Jewish refugees. He later graduated from the National Farm School. This was fascinating. So he served in the military, after the war, he served as an interpreter with the United Nations War Crimes Commission. And even during the war, once they learned that he spoke German, they assigned him to help set up new governments in the conquered German towns. Isn't that fascinating? And he was in town meeting from 1969 to 2013.
He also was on the town meeting coordinating committee.
That's
when
right.
I was 1 year.
Yes.
When I served at the same time as I did.
And I was on the committee at that point two, I think. I think I overlapped with you and Otto for maybe 1 year. Yes, it said that his obituary said he served on the town meeting coordinating committee. By the way, the town meeting coordinating committee is a committee that is elected by members of town meeting, and its role is to try to improve town meeting, try to help educate town meeting members about what town meeting does. They sponsor what's called a warrant review before every town meeting, which goes over all the articles, that's the points of discussion in town meeting. And warrant reviews are open to the public as well as town meeting members. And so yes,
the town meeting coordinating committee actually helps town meeting members do their homework,
right,
of which they've been often accused of not doing, but as a matter of fact, they do. And some members do more homework on some articles than others, is true of most legislatures, I think.
Yeah, and so Ott Stein served on Town Meeting Coordinating Committee, which is called TMCC, for 9 years. He was also a member of the Public Shade Tree Committee. I remember him serving on the Conservation Commission for quite a number of years. And I didn't know until I read this obituary, he was a founding member of the Amherst NAACP. So I wish I had read all these while the people were still alive. He just did so many amazing things. He was a fellow at the Linnean Society in London. Diana Stein wrote in about how he served for 35 years in town meeting, and she said he really loved town meeting and prepared for it by reading everything there was about the warrant articles. I have a lovely quote from one of his former students that I'll read. I found this online. Speaking about Ott Stein, the student said, "I had the pleasure of being a student of Dr. Stein's twice, once in 1989 as an undergraduate, genetics and evolution, and again in 1991 as a graduate student, plant anatomy. Beneath his somewhat gruff exterior and acerbic wit was someone who cared deeply about his fellow man, and never let you forget it. I am happy to say I scored an A in both his courses, not because they were easy, they were not, but because he demanded your best and made you reach deeper than you ever had." I thought that was a lovely quote. Okay, so anything else that you wanted to add about? I did have another comment from Hilda Greenbaum. Mentioned that she served on the committee to study the impact of affordable housing in town, and she served with Otto, Marilyn Gonter, who we're going to discuss a little later, and Ken Mazakowski. So he was dedicated many years of his life to public service in all sorts of ways. Okay, well, let's now move to Louis Greenbaum. I know you knew him very well. Why don't you start off, Molly?
Well, I knew Louis Greenbaum best when he served on the Board of Library Trustees.
Right.
And that's when I really developed a strong friendship with him and Hilda. But I knew that what he cared about was historic preservation. And in town meeting, he gave some wonderful speeches about preserving our buildings. As a matter of fact, I think that we have, I'm not sure about what the fate of the church, which is now the Jewish Community Center, would have been if he had not been a strong proponent of the Jewish Community Center buying that church and preserving it. And it was, and he was a scholar of churches, and he was a history professor at UMass, and he was for many years he was very well respected in the department. But I found out when I went to his memorial service, I found out all of these things I hadn't known about Louis, and there was his role in getting the Jewish Community Center in Amherst, but at the same time preserving this wonderful church, that New England icon, and they preserve, sometimes with the help of conservation of the Community Preservation Act, the steeple of that church. We could lose these things. We're losing our iconic buildings, all over. And especially New England. New England churches were important, but Louis, I think he did dissertations on church history, and that I think that he went to Europe. I think that's how he and Hilda got to, or that's when they went to Paris. He was also very ecumenical, and very. If Louis was your friend, he was your supporter. And he was very supportive of me on the library, and he was very clear about the importance of the library building. And he feels that this is, he knew every aspect of the building's exterior and interior. And he cared very much about its preservation.
Yeah, I certainly remember, well, I also was a library trustee with you and Louis at the same time. And I remember...
I think only for one day when we were transitioning.
We overlapped, I think, for at least a year with Louis, because I remember meetings with him. Anyway, I do recall, too, in town meeting that he was so passionate about historic preservation. I know preserving the historic district in the area of Emily Dickinson's house was very important to him, and preserving the Jones Library, and he would give rousing speeches in town meeting just about how important this was. And so he was not only an authority, but just a passionate advocate.
And a teacher. I mean, he taught us about the importance of preservation.
Right.
And we learned a lot by being in town meeting and hearing from experts.
Oh, yes. And so here's a little bit about the range of his expertise. By the way, he just died last year. He had lived from 1930 to 2017. And born in Chicago, had his PhD from Harvard, was a professor of history at UMass from 1955 to 1992. He specialized in 17th and 18th century European history, church history, as you said, and the history of public health and medicine in France. He wrote numerous articles, one book. He was a Fulbright, had a Fulbright Fellowship, and then became the chair of the University Fulbright Fellowship Program. He was the founding member of the Jewish community of Amherst and was instrumental, as you said, in finding their location.
Yes.
He served on the Historic Commission in the 1970s, and again, 40 years later, was a Jones Library trustee. I have a lovely quote from one of his students, but did you want to say another story?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. What was your... All right, the student mentioned, as a former teacher during my graduate school years at UMass, Professor Greenbaum always impressed me as a humanist par excellence with deep roots in the Western tradition, be it literature, history, music, or the arts. For this and the consideration always shown me personally, I am most thankful and would like to dedicate my next Mozart Requiem performance to his memory. May he rest in peace. Isn't that lovely?
Beautiful, yes. Well, I think Louis had just such a wealth of knowledge, information, and he was a great addition to the library trustees.
Absolutely. And Hilda, his wife, is still serving in town meeting, and
yes.
And we'll provide photos that will go along with this video. So next we'll talk about Art Swift. Could you talk about what you remember about Art?
One of the first committee that I served on in Amherst was the Public Transportation and Bicycle Committee. And he and Arthur was the chair.
Right.
And he was passionate about the bicycle part of the transportation. Now, the transportation committee has morphed through many iterations.
Right.
But at that time, I was on it. I was on it for, I think, 2 terms, and was chair for the last year. But and he had left the Transportation Committee before. He was chair for
Right,
many years.
right.
And then many others of us took that role. But what he did as a leader for preserving bicycles, encouraging bicycles, was he somehow put together the whatever one has to do to get a trail, and he got a bicycle trail, and it's called the Swift Way.
Right.
Which I think is just a
great.
delightful name
Lovely.
for Swift Way, because you can get there
Absolutely.
much faster by going on the Swift Way, which is down on, it actually goes to the campus.
Right. It's the connector to
right.
the UMass. Yeah.
But it was some of us on the Public Transportation Committee were very interested in, were concerned about global warming even back then, and about what automobiles are doing to the atmosphere. And we thought that we'd like to promote more bicycling and be sure to keep public buses. They were the PVTA bus situation was, sometimes it was not fully supported by the community. And this was something that when I was on it, we felt was important to do. He was a very good chairman of that committee.
Yes.
And a member of town meeting, yeah.
Absolutely, right, yes. So he was also a physics professor at UMass. His wife, Alice, wrote in that he bicycled from his home in South Amherst every day, except in bad weather when he took the PVTA bus. So that's personal dedication.
Right, certainly.
And she also mentioned how Congressman John Oliver got federal funding. Oliver got federal funding for the Noatak Rail Trail, partly because Art had negotiated that with him.
Yeah, we did. We also got at that time the commuter bus, or the shopping, the bus that went down Amity Street to the stores, to the Stop and Shop.
Right.
And I remember when they found out that, I think they were first of all thinking of the Big Y, that it would stop at the Big Y. But the manager of the Stop and Shop came to one of our meetings, and he was very adamant that he needed to include Stop and Shop. And they have been the Stop and Shop has been very cooperative in having the bus go there.
Yes.
And those first years of that shopper's bus, I lived on Amity Street, and I sometimes rode that bus, and the people that used it really depended on that bus to get to elderly people in particular, and disabled people, because the PVTA buses really made it easy for people to get on.
That's right.
And also, I don't know whether Art had anything to do with this or not, but the PVTA then had apparatus where people could take their bikes and put them on the front of the bus.
Yep.
So lots of good things happened under his chairmanship.
That's
of
great.
The PVTA. But as a town meeting member, I don't remember so much, but he was a definite presence there.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, his obituary also mentioned that he was instrumental in bringing fare-free bus service to Amherst for students, very important for students and residents. And he also became the town's representative to the Pioneer Valley Transit Authority.
Yes.
And he's also served on the Finance Committee.
He served on a lot of committees.
So many committees.
I remember that. Yes,
yes.
He really was important.
He joined the Faculty of Physics and Astronomy Department in 1967, where he conducted research in high-energy theoretical physics until he retired in 2003. I just find it really interesting how so many people in town meeting are just experts in their field, but also experts in how the town works, because they've done so much volunteer service.
That's correct.
Over the years.
Right. It's really a repository of knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah.
What is that? The sum of its parts is greater than in each individual.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. And so
than any individual. I mean, just the whole.
Right. It's a rich assortment of expertise.
The whole body of expertise has been. And all the people that we're talking about, they love town meeting, and they love town meeting because they loved the community of Amherst.
Well, and it was
a special place.
It was such a great way to get so much expertise in one place where people could really represent the views of the town and from so many different perspectives. Another couple things about his service, he was on the Norwottic Rail Trail Advisory Committee, and he served in town meeting from the 1970s to 2005. So that's
there you go.
A lifetime of service.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, very important town meeting member.
Absolutely. So the next person we'll talk about is Alice Epstein. What do you remember about Alice?
I didn't know Alice Epstein. I just know her by reputation.
Okay. Well, sure.
But she's very important in conservation.
Absolutely.
And I don't, if you have the information on it, it's down by Atkins, and there's water, the Alice Brook.
There's a pond.
Alice Pond,
yes,
right.
It was very
That was named for her. And I think they donated a lot of land.
They did, and
to conservation. I mean, like enormous,
huge amounts. And they also had a conservation area called the Sweet Alice Conservation Area.
That's it, the Sweet Alice. That's what I was stretching for.
Yep.
That's right.
Yep.
And people that served, I know someone who served on committees with her, and so she was just the best. She would, to be chair of a committee, she would really, was very efficient and wonderful to work with.
And she also was someone who just came with a wealth of experience and very bright. She was a valedictorian of her high school, and then she attended Douglas College, which was a branch of Rutgers. She later got a PhD in sociology from UMass, and she died, she was diagnosed with cancer in 1985. But she actually beat the cancer at that point and lived cancer-free for 28 years. She was, I remember she was trying very hard to preserve the conservation area near her pond. And I remember her going to the Conservation Commission to try to, I think there was a development that was being discussed near her pond. And she was fighting hard to try to preserve a stream that was going through that area. So she cared hugely about conservation, and even now there's a fund that her children, I think, are part of a trust that's helping to buy more conservation land for the town. I think we're getting close to the end of our time. So we will thank you for joining this segment, and we still have more town meeting members to discuss. So please come back for the next segment.